Keanu Reeves is known for his kindness as much as he is for his movies and acting skills. Although his generosity is featured as the main character in many stories, this particular one will still completely shock you. Here is how Keanu Reeves came across an injured bear and saved it from its inevitable demise. Get ready to hear a story of heartbreak, bravery, and determination. You do not want to miss this. One morning, the peace was broken by a sound that did not belong in the Whistler Forest. It sent chills instantly up Keanu Reeves's back. Hearing something like that was never a good sign. Something was terribly wrong nearby. But what? The sharp, agonized cry echoed through the trees, freezing Reeves in his tracks. He had heard many animal sounds in his time acting in various forests, but this was different, unnatural. The upper Whistler territory was a dense forest, stretching endlessly, but it was only broken up by the odd burst of sunlight that could penetrate through the thick canopy. Keanu Reeves, an experienced actor who had been to these woods a few times for the production of his new film, knew them better than anyone. He had passed so many days and nights on the rough terrain and adapted to the place so as not to appear out of place during filming, but nothing could have prepared him for the horrible noise echoing through the forest that eerie morning. As he explored further into the Whistler woods that morning, he was surrounded by the sounds of nature that he had grown up with in Canada. Leaves rustled, the wind whispered, and a twig snapped beneath his foot. It was a place of peace, a sanctuary that Reeves would have dedicated his life to protecting if he had lived there. He would always look out for key markers of certain animals being around, like he was trained to do for this demanding role. He had recently noticed that there had been a bear hanging around, so he kept his wits about him. In the blink of an eye, he could be staring down a fierce predator, something he tried to avoid to the best of his ability, but when he heard that sound filled with such pain and despair that it sent a chill down his spine, his hand instinctively moved to the bear repellent he kept on him at all times, his senses suddenly on high alert. If the animal was moving, he least wanted to meet it when he did. An injured animal was a dangerous creature by all means, especially during the time of panic. Standing there motionless, he leaned to his best judgment of where the sound was coming from. It came again, this time louder, a guttural, heart-wrenching wail that tore through the stillness of the forest. It was unmistakably a bear, but there was something more, a note of desperation that twisted Reeves's gut with unease. It is not normal to hear a bear call out like this. It only usually happens under extenuating circumstances. Reeves's stomach curled up into a ball at the thought of what the bear might be facing, but there was something in the call, though, that pulled desperately at his heartstrings. He couldn't help but want to fulfill the need to check it out. Something was telling him he needed to investigate, so against his better judgment, he began to move toward the sound. He was cautious, all his instincts told him, that an injured bear was unpredictably dangerous and could be lethal. But there was something beyond that urging him forward into the knowledge that whatever was going to happen, the animal was clearly in some desperate need of help. He got close enough to see a clear opening through the trees before him to a small clearing. Reeves's breath hitched in his throat. A massive grizzly bear, its fur matted and dirty, lay in the center of the clearing, its right front paw caught in a steel-jawed trap, its head ensnared in a wire noose that cut straight into its flesh, and barbed wire tangled around its hind leg. Every movement made the bear groan low, pitifully. Reeves's heart was racing within his chest. He had seen the aftermath of poaching before, animals maimed or killed for sport, their bodies left to rot in the wilderness. But he had never witnessed such a barbaric act up close. He felt a mix of rage and sorrow at the suffering bear. He paused for a moment. The bear was enormous and the muscles rippled, even though he was weakened, his swipe of powerful claws enough to kill him easily. However, as he looked at the eyes of that bear, he saw something that decided him. There's fear in those eyes, yes, but there is something else, a plea for mercy or a respite from the excruciating pain it suffers. Reeves slowly put down the safety precautions he had been carrying, bear spray, and placed them all on the ground before him, a gesture of peace that he hoped the bear would understand. He stood up, raised his hands up in the air, revealing them to be empty, and took a cautious step forward. The bear growled a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the ground beneath him, and Reeves froze, his heart racing. "It's all right, big guy," he whispered softly, his voice steady despite the adrenaline running through his veins. "I'm here to help." The growling of the bear subsided a bit, though its eyes remained fixed on him. watching his every move. He knew he was risking everything because any sudden move would actuate the instinct of defense by the bear. He couldn't leave it there to suffer silently, slowly falling prey to death. Reeves took measured and deliberate steps toward the bear. As he reached near enough to touch the bear, he kneeled beside the bear to look at the trap clamped onto its paw. The flesh had been sliced deep into by the steel jaws, and blood trickled out of the wound. Reeves's stomach churned at the sight, but he forced himself to focus. "I'm going to get you out of this," he said quietly, not sure if the bear could even understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his intentions. Being meticulously deliberate, Reeves rummaged through his pack for whatever could help him as he finally gained hold of the bolt cutters he had been carrying to use as a prop earlier. The bear gazed on, its breath harsh and sore. Every second was an eternity as he placed the cutters around the steel trap, grunting with effort as he squeezed the handles, and the metal protested before yielding with a sharp crack. The trap sprang open, releasing the bear's paw. The animal let out a pained roar, thrashing in the dirt. Reeves instinctively backed away, but the bear didn't attack. Instead, it struggled to its feet only to collapse again, its strength sapped by days of torment. Reeves moved to the noose next, carefully cutting away the wire that had bitten into the bear's neck. Blood welled up around the wound as the pressure was relieved, but the bear stayed still as if sensing that Reeves was trying to help. At last, he turned his attention to the barbed wire entangled around its hind legs. It was slow work, each barb tugging at the bear's flesh as he labored to be free. When the final wire had been removed, Reeves sat back on his knees, gasping for breath. The bear lay still, but its chest rose and fell slowly with laborious breaths. It was free, but hardly safe. Reeves pulled out his cell phone, and his fingers rattled as he dialed the number of the nearest wildlife clinic. The line rang once, twice, before a voice came back and said, "This is the British Columbia Wildlife Clinic. How can we help you?" "This is Keanu Reeves," he said, his voice steady as he talked. "I've got an injured bear badly trapped. I need an extraction team out here fast." She waited for a second, then suddenly came to attention and snapped back at him. "Roger that. We'll dispatch a team immediately." "Can you give us your coordinates?" Reeves rattled off his location, his eyes never leaving the bear. It lay motionless, its eyes half closed as if on the verge of unconsciousness. He knew the bear was in critical condition. Without immediate medical attention, it wouldn't survive much longer. "Hang in there, buddy," Reeves whispered more to himself than to the bear. "Help is on the way." The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. Reeves kept an eye on the surrounding forest, alert for any sign of the poachers who had set the traps. He had no doubt they were still in the area, and the thought of confronting them sent a surge of anger through him. As soon as he had decided he should have turned around and headed back for the rest of the crew, the silence was broken by the distant rumble of a car or truck coming. Reeves rose to his feet and waved as the wildlife clinic's truck came into view. The team, a veterinarian and 2 assistants, wasted little time in unloading their gear and cautiously approaching the bear. "Jesus," the vet muttered as he took in the bear's condition. "What kind of monster does this?" Poachers," Reeves replied grimly. "We have to hurry. He has lost a lot of blood." The team moved with haste, sedating the bear and carefully loading it into the transport vehicle. Reeves assisted as much as he could, his heart heavy with worry. As they prepared to leave, the vet turned to him. "We'll do everything we can, but I won't lie, he's in bad shape." "I understand," Reeves said, his voice tight. "Just do your best." With that, the truck rumbled to life and set off down the dirt road, the bear's fate now in the hands of the clinic's skilled staff. Reeves saw it disappear in the horizon. A wave of powerlessness overcame him, yet he couldn't let the burning anger buried beneath it all to fade. Someone had done this, and they were out there, free to do the same to the other animals. He couldn't think of that. Reeves decided then and there he was going to track down the poachers responsible for this and see to it that they would never again be able to harm another creature again. The next few days passed like a blur of frustration and dead ends. Reeves spent every waking moment that he wasn't acting trying to track down the poachers, but they were elusive, leaving no trace behind. He spoke with some of the security personnel and placed surveillance cameras at certain hunting grounds, hoping that they would be caught in the act. But the forest remained quiet. Meanwhile, there were hardly any updates coming from the clinic, and Teddy, as the staff had started calling the bear, clung to life. The wounds were deep, and infection had already begun to set in. The veterinary team worked relentlessly in an effort to save him, but there was no promise. Reeves felt a desperation build inside him. He needed to find the responsible individuals before Teddy was let out into the wild again. Otherwise, the thought of the bear trapped, or worse, dead, was just too much to handle. It was late one night after a grueling day on set when Reeves's phone buzzed, jolting him awake. He grabbed it, squinting at the screen. It was an alert from one of the wildlife cameras he had set up. Heart pounding, Reeves jumped out of bed and quickly dressed. He grabbed a few wildlife experts and headed out into the night, his breath clouding in the cool air. The forest was silent except for the crunch of boots on the ground as they followed the signal from the camera. The deeper he ventured into the woods, the more his anxiety grew. The camera had picked up movement in an area that was rarely patrolled, a remote corner of the forest that was far from any trails. It was the perfect place for poachers to operate unnoticed. As they approached the location, the forest grew darker, the trees closing in around them. He advised slowing pace to move as quietly as possible. He didn't want to alarm anyone out there. At last, they reached the clearing where the camera was installed. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground. Reeves dropped down low, scanning the ground. Then he saw it, a newly laid trap, its steel jaws glistening in the pale light. His heart skipped a beat. They were here, but before he could even react, a sharp snap resounded through the clearing. Reeves spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. A dark figure was coming at him, the shape of a rifle slung over its shoulder. Without thinking, Reeves dived at the figure and tackled them to the ground. They kicked, but Reeves was stronger because of a righteous fury that had been building up for days. He wrestled the rifle away and pinned the person to the ground. The beam of several flashlights lighted up the face of a middle-aged man, his eyes enlarged in fear. "Who are you?" demanded Reeves, his voice deep in danger. "Why do this?" The fellow did not answer, a look of fear crossing him, as he darted nervous glances at the faces of several people staring in turn at him. "An explanation now!" shouted Reeves. "How many traps have you set?" The man finally broke, his voice quivering as he said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to make some money." "By torturing animals?" Reeves's voice was cold, every word laced with disgust. "You're going to pay for this." He pulled out his phone and called the police, the other wildlife experts taking over until help arrived. The man offered no resistance as he was handcuffed and led away, his head hanging in shame. As the police secured the scene and began cataloging evidence, Reeves's thoughts turned back to Teddy. The bear had suffered because of this man's greed, and there was no telling how many other animals had met the same fate. The police thanked Reeves for his diligence, but their words did little to ease the knot of anger in his chest. He had stopped one man, but he knew there were others out there waiting for their chance to strike. The days that followed were tense. Reeves made as many visits to the clinic as he could, keeping an eye on Teddy's progress. The bear remained sedated, his condition stable but fragile. The staff did everything they could, but the extent of his injuries meant recovery would be a long and uncertain road. They simply had to sit back now and pray that the poor bear had enough in his reservoirs to start healing from within. In cases like these, it very often came down to whether the animal's body could withstand the trauma it had experienced. Reeves was sure that Teddy would be the exception. He really wanted to believe that he would be okay. Days turned into weeks and Reeves's frustration was growing. The clinic was ready to let Teddy back into the wild, but Reeves couldn't help but feel that it was too soon. The poachers had been quiet since the arrest, but he knew better than to assume they were gone for good. Finally, the day arrived when the clinic deemed that Teddy was ready to be set free. Reeves witnessed the group of workers preparing to transfer him into a transport crate very carefully. The bear was groggy but alive. He was healing from his wounds, although the scars would be with him for the rest of his life. As they drove deep into the forest, Reeves couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. He had protected Teddy as much as possible, but when the bear was let go, he would be back on his own. They reached a remote area of the forest, far from any known poaching sites. The team carefully opened the crate, and Teddy stepped out, his massive frame moving slowly but steadily. He paused, looking around as if unsure of where he was, his nose twitching as it hit the fresh air outside the crate, and he lifted his head up high as if to check that it was where he should be. It was a sight to behold, considering what he had looked like just a few weeks prior. Reeves watched from afar. He found himself to be in conflict at the time of the release of the beautiful bear. While he knew he was meant to be in the wild, he couldn't help but get nervous. He wanted to believe that the bear would be safe, that the worst was behind him. But nature was unpredictable, and so were the people who sought to exploit it. He had first-hand experience in this area. As Teddy started to walk away, he stopped and turned around to look back at the group. His dark eyes met Reeves's, and for a moment, it felt as though the bear was acknowledging him, thanking him for everything he had done. Tears welled up in Reeves's eyes as he watched Teddy disappear into the forest. The team packed up their gear and prepared to leave, but Reeves lingered, staring into the trees where the bear had vanished. He knew he couldn't protect Teddy forever. The forest was vast and dangers lurked in every shadow, but he also knew that he would never stop trying. He'd keep fighting for as long as there was breath in his body for the creatures of this place. Because if it weren't Teddy, it would have been another innocent animal worthy of his protection. What did you think of this real-life hero story? Would you be able to handle such a situation? Let us know in the comments and like and subscribe for more.